Hello, welcome. Today we're going to be doing the adult face mask. More than likely just the pattern and cutting out our fabric, hopefully. So if you are going to join me today, you have your things ready, which is your paper, your pencil, your scissors, your ruler, your card, and that's probably all we're going to need for now. So just make sure that I've got all my stuff ready. Yes, I think we are ready to go. So first of all, we're going to start by making the pattern. And we are now the sosewcafe. So our pattern is going to start. I'm just recycling some paper. I have some lined paper. It was used for our homeschooling. And, well, I say homeschooling. What's that? Some kind of a game. It's all part of the game. So we're going to simply start by folding our paper in half. We're looking for a size of the pattern to be like this, this is the cut on fold part here. So we need it to fit into that, which is why I cut it into half. Fold it into half. So I always do everything in halves so that you've got, when you pull it out, you've got the full pattern, how it should be. Or you can use that by cutting down there, and then you've got two patterns, one to stick on your card and one to just keep in your file for if you want to do something like that again in the future. So the card one is the one that you would then use to cut out. It's better if you've got a card copy that keeps it a bit safer. And then the paper one you can always keep as your original pattern and then change the pattern so that it's that you can adapt it for other ones and do copies from that one. So folded it in half, simply to begin with. Now our pattern has certain measurements on it. So it is 19 centimetres tall by 13 centimetres at the widest part. So that's what we're going to do first of all, is going to put those measurements onto our paper and get started. So 19 centimetres is going to be along this folded edge here. Now I've got quite a good big old ruler, but this, you don't need to necessarily have that one. You just need, any ruler would do. You can find one if you're homeschooling and you've got some nice, got a ruler around, or simply a tape measure if you've only got tape measure, anything so you can see the measurements on it. So 19 centimetres along this edge. So 19 centimetres, so this is 21 centimetres because it is A4 width is. So 19 centimetres, so I'm going to mark 9, so there's the 19 there, and I'm going to mark it at the 0 point there. So I'm going to do that all the way along there, and that. 19 centimetres all the way along. So we now have markers here. So you should have then, so from top to that new line there is 19 centimetres. Okay, so I'm going to write that on there. Put a marker so that we've got like a line running through the middle. So we know that's 19 centimetres tall. Down to the new line I've just done. It's helpful if you then at that point start to chop that bit off. So we're using our normal paper scissors or kitchen scissors, and we're going to trim that. So we have 19 centimetres rectangle. And so if we now check how wide that is, it's just under 15 centimetres, and I said it's 13 centimetres wide, this pattern, at the widest point. So in the middle, I'm going to measure from 0 to 13 and mark where that is, and I'm going to do exactly the same as what I did on the bottom edge and just mark that. So we're going to end up with a smaller rectangle. it'll be 13 centimetres by 19 centimetres. We'll do that line across there. I'm going to show you. So that line at its widest point is 13 centimetres. So you see I've just done exactly the same there, and that's now given us a lovely edge there, and I'm just going to trim that off as well. So we now have 19 by 13 centimetres rectangle. It's not a rectangle that way as well, it's a double on the fold, so that long edge there is the one that stays at 19 centimetres, so we must make sure that that doesn't change. So I'm going to put along there 19 centimetres. Do a nice arrow line so I know that's always going to stay 19 centimetres. In fact, at this point it's quite a good idea then to pen that on. That is the bit that's not going to change now. Okay, so that's that bit. So, and then we're going to put our cut on fold sign on there now. The cut on fold sign is simply just an arrow that then say this part is where you're going to put on the fabric fold when you're cutting out your pattern. So, cut on fold sign, simply done. You can write cut on fold, or you can do this sign as I'm going to show you now. So you do like a little line, parallel line to the fold line. And once you've done that, you're then going to join that. So it makes a nice little sort of like rectangle. And then you're going to put a love a cut on fold. And that's just me. So I then have arrows on there, and then also to make sure that you know definitely it's cut on fold, cut on fold. There it is. So now we need to make sure that this is the right shape for the pattern. Now the pattern has angles going up on the bottom and angles going down, and then that's just another, that is parallel to that edge there. So I'm going to choose which one is my top. I'm going to write top and bottom. Then there's no chance of me getting confused. Well, still a chance to get confused, but yeah. I've just realised I'm matching my jacket over here. I seem to be matching something whenever I'm... Anyway, so top and bottom of it, we've got those bits done. So now I need to work out what's happening with these angles. How am I going to get them in? That one's already in. It's there. That edge is done. I just need to work out how I'm going to put these angles in. So I'm going to use, well, I have this cutting mat here, and it's really handy for these things. You may have a cutting mat at home. A lot of people do have cutting mats. If not, just use some sort of graph paper or maths-based paper, anything with squares on it, and you should be able to work that out, no problem. So I'm going to just use my, I'll use my card pattern first for this to demonstrate. So if you can see where it is on the mat, you've got this big angle, this big sort of square edge that would come out here, but that's missing, and then this again at the top, so you can see where your angles should be. So I'm going to put this down now, because you obviously haven't got this one to copy from, which I have. You need your measurements. So the measurements from the top down is going to be, where is it? It's at its widest point along it's 14.5 centimetres. I think I've done 14.5 centimetres. So down along this edge, it's going to be 14.5 centimetres. We need to lower it down so far on this pattern. So to show you that, I'm going to put my original, well, my new pattern on the bottom, line it up on the right angles on the cutting mat, lay down my pattern piece on top. I'm going to mark on there how much I'm going to need to take off. I'm going to draw that line on there just so it's easier for you to see. I'm going to mark that other part there. So I've marked how far down it needs to be on this edge and how far up it needs to be on this edge. So all I'll do now is I'll simply tell you what those measurements are. So the one from the top is 1 centimetre down. So you're going to mark 1 centimetre down from the top of that page, and you're going to draw a line from that marker back to the top edge of the folded side, like that. Okay, and then just going to rewrite that top because it's got a bit chopped off, and then I'm going to chop it off as well. So I'm just going to trim off that edge. As long as you don't take any off this folded edge side, so you don't want to lose any of that piece of the pattern. And then, so I'm now going to measure up from the bottom to the little notch I've just made. It's about 3.2 centimetres. So 3.2 centimetres up, you're going to make a notch. Drop my pencil. And I'm going to do, with the rule, you're going to do a straight line from the bottom edge corner to a new marker so that you'll have your bottom angle in. Okay, so you have this new line here, and you can see I've just lost my bottom. So just write that back in there, my bottom back in place. And I'm going to trim this off now. Again, making sure that I don't lose any of that little edge there. So hopefully we're getting closer to what the pattern should be at this moment. So we've taken off the top angle, we've taken up the bottom angle. We've now got our widest part, which is from here to here, 13 centimetres. And we've also got, we're 19 centimetres along there. So if I open this out, that is the pattern that we've created. Okay, there will be other bits that will be added to this. So what I will need to do is now glue this down to some card. Now I'm just going to use just a nice cereal box that we've got. So we're always recycling everything we've got. So just prepare that ready. And do this, trim that all down. And make sure that we are got a flat surface to work on. So then all we're going to do now is I'll just check these measurements. I think that should be fine. So the straight grain of the fabric, which is really important to mark down on here as well, is basically the distance from the line that we did originally from top to bottom, because that should be like it's central. It should be in a parallel to this folded edge. And usually the folded edge or the selve edge, which is this outer edge here, is the line that follows the straight grain of the fabric. The straight grain of the fabric is just the direction that the fabric goes in. So most fabric, it's obvious to tell which way is the predominant grain line. So I'm going to just mark that as the straight grain. So I'd already done the distance, and I've marked down that it was 19 centimetres with a little arrow at either top and the bottom. And now I'm just going to make sure that I write on there straight grain. I know what that signal means, but it's good as you're learning to just get used to writing all these things. The same with the cut and fold. I know what cut and fold is, but but it's useful to just put it on there, even as just a reminder sometimes for yourself. So now we need to glue it on. Just realised the glue's over the other side of the room. Actually, not the other side of the room, in the other room. Always prepared. So, I'm going to take this pattern, I'm going to copy what's on this side to the other side. I could cut it out like this, I could do it just straight like that onto the card, and then I've got one piece, one pattern, or I can chop it up, split it into two, keep one as a separate pattern piece. So that's what I'm going to do today. Make sure that you're trimming exactly on that fold line. If you need to, draw a line down there, makes it easier to follow. So then you've got this piece ready. So I'm going to keep this one as my original pattern that I'm not going to stick down on the card. I'm going to keep this one for me. And I'm going to stick this one down on the card. Now, using the least amount of card possible, I think I can get away with sticking it on this end of the card. But I don't want to see the choco hoops, so I'm going to stick it on that side, and then when I turn it over, I can write on the cardboard. And that's when you can do your nice colourful pens on there. So I'm going to use a little bit of the spare bit of the card we've got from our box. Stick some glue on either the back of the pattern or on the card. It doesn't matter which way around you do it, as long as you've got some on there. Plenty. You will need to let it dry, but I think we should be alright. We should get away with it today. Just don't want to get anything on the fabric. But when you're using something like PVA, or you can use any Pritt stick or any kind of glue, be fine for this. Don't use super glue or anything, because that might get a bit messy and get stuck to it. And as much as we want to keep the pattern, we don't really want to glue ourselves to it, do we? So I'm also, this is a side of the paper that has drawing on it, so I'm going to stick that side down. So at least I've got two sides then of my new pattern piece that are usable again. And then you can put your same markers back onto these. And that is a really good sort of thing to get into, making sure that you yeah, I can't think what I'm saying. Too busy getting this stuck down. So then we're going to cut that. Again, just really trying not to use up any waste any card or paper with this. So if we use like normal pattern paper, which you can buy proper pattern paper. I've got loads of it behind me. But there's something so much nicer about just using recycled paper rather than using a fresh sheet of paper. When it comes to doing patterns, normally I would, I'm very good at talking at the same time as cutting, it seems. Yeah, I would usually take, it depends on what kind of pattern I'm doing. If I'm starting from scratch, I use just a normal pattern paper. But what I would usually do is get like a book pattern and then stick it down, masking tape it down onto some pattern paper, use my light box and actually then transfer the pattern onto the pattern paper. But yeah, with these sorts of smaller projects, much nicer to use things that are around us. And especially when we can't get out and buy new things necessarily as easy as we could have done. So I now have my pattern paper piece and the paper on the card piece. So we also have the back available to draw on. It doesn't matter which side I would mark, because remember, if it's cut on fold, it's going to be repeated anyway, so it's just going to be the same either side. So just so that I've got a record of what I've done here, I will do it on, I'm going to do it on the white side, I think. I like the way that the stripes are very helpful in being my parallel lines that I need anyway. So maybe my cotton fold, I'm going to do this straight with the pen. I'm going to do a parallel line. I would usually use pattern cutting, pattern markers and things, but you don't need to do that. A ruler and pencils do exactly what you need it to do. If you want to be really precise and make sure that is parallel, you just measure there and then draw a line between. So that's cut on fold, and that will make sense when we cut it out how what I'm doing. Hopefully it will make sense. So the cotton fold on that side there, we're going to put on our straight grain. Straight grain is here. So it's a line, just as I say, following one of the lines that's already there. Right on it. Straight grain. This is helpful if you decide to use something like a striped fabric. You know that the direction of the stripe should go in line with that one, so it should be parallel to that. Obviously you could choose to use the stripes that way, but this is like the sort of the most obvious normal way of it being done. So then the measurement, I'm going to add these measurements on. I might just add these on in a little pencil. So the edge, this side, the non-fold edge is 14.5 centimetres. So I'm going to draw a little arrow at that end and then draw a line to connect those, and that is 14.5. This is just for me, for in the future, to know the dimensions without having to measure them. So the widest part is, we say it was 13 centimetres across. So again, just going to mark that in pencil with a little arrow either side. And this is what happens when you don't wait for your paper to dry, you start ripping it off accidentally. So that's 13 centimetres along that way. And then the longest part, which was 19 centimetres, hopefully you all remember that part anyway, 19 centimetres along on this top edge here. So again, these are just reminders for in the future, 19 centimetres. Or sometimes if I'm cutting out and I'll forget, and I'll need to know the measurement as I'm doing it, so I know what I'm doing. Okay, so we have 19 centimetres along that edge. So that is basically our pattern all ready to go. So now you need your fabric. So I had chosen to use, if I can find it. Ah, here it is. So just going to use some sheets and some pillowcases that I was gifted by my auntie. Really helpful. I think these are going to be perfect for making these face masks. It's been a while. I've been meaning to try and do these for, well, since the sort of start of the lockdown and things. Time, and sometimes things don't just quite work out how you want them to. So but we're doing them now, and to hopefully, and especially because we've got lots of the white cotton fabric, I can hopefully do some prints or something for them, so that I might do another tutorial on how to print them next time. So I think what we're going to get done now is just get the fabric cut out ready, and then we'll gather ourselves and get together again soon to do the next part. So just going to open out the sheet. Now we need two pieces. It's cut on fold. It's cut times 2. That's another thing that we need to make sure we've written on here. Cut on fold times 2. Now that means that we're going to fold the fabric, and this nice folded edge is going to be doubled. So you're going to have one piece for the inside of the mask and then one piece for the outside. So it's going to then encompass all of your seams inside. I did find some elastic earlier that I thought would be really quite fun to add into it. It's like a rainbow elastic that I found. Because again, it's not about going out and buying lots of new stuff. It's about using what we've got. And I found that. I don't know what I bought that for, but got it, and it'll hopefully it'll look really good. So I folded it in half, so we've got a fold line there, which is what this can go on to, but it needs to be doubled, so I need to make sure that that is folded over on itself. So now I'm left with 2 folded edges together, which means that in total I have 4 layers here. The pattern will then sit straight on top. And you try and use the least amount of the fabric as possible. So I'm going to pin that on. It's a bit harder to pin through card, but as I said, it is a lot sturdier. If you don't have pins, you can use anything. You can weigh it down with something else. So even if you use something heavy on top and then hold it down, because it's only a small piece, a pattern piece, you can cut round that whilst holding it down. Ideally you should pin it down, it'd be easier, always a lot easier. So pin in every single each corner, so you might bend some of your pins doing this as well, especially going through 4 layers of fabric and card as well. Proving trickier for my little fingers today. Again, if you wanted to use your paper pattern for this part, that's absolutely fine. It doesn't matter, it's just the way I prefer to do it. Because then when I'm cutting this pattern out, especially when I'm showing you, if I had paper like right now, it'd be going a bit waffy. So at least with the card on there, that means I know that my fabric underneath is not going to go anywhere. It's not going to do anything that I don't want it to do. Now I need my fabric scissors. You need to make sure you keep your fabric scissors away from the card edge, but you can use the card edge to make sure you cut a nice straight line along it. So you use it as a sort of a guide, and nice and sensibly trim it up that side, then down that side, and then down the other side. I say, if this was paper, it would have just sort of moved about a lot more. It smells so nice and clean, these sheets. Yeah, these were gifted from my auntie, just for fabric, and I've used one part of it for making an apron. You can print nicely onto this. As I say, I think I'm going to do some little tutorials on how to print on this. Some nice ideas, I think. So this is what we've got, and it's all cut out. So I'm going to take the pins out. If you do cut it out in paper, you may need to pin round more. So you may need to pin round on the middle section there, maybe there, maybe there, maybe there, just to make sure that it doesn't move when you are cutting it out. The more pins, the better if you are a beginner. So just take all those out. Then I'll show that we have, don't worry, your patterns will get a bit battered. So we have one piece and 2 pieces. So the two pieces are there and they're ready. So one's going to be the front, one's going to be the back. Okay, top and bottom. Okay, so on this, on the original pattern, we have it that I'm holding it the wrong way, aren't I? But the top is shallower in its diagonal than the bottom one. The bottom ones are much steeper in its diagonal line. So I need to make sure that on my fabric I know what those are. So this is where we need the cloth marker. Again, as I mentioned, you don't necessarily need a cloth marker. You don't need it at all. You can use a pencil or a pen, as long as you are aware that you may end up seeing some of that on the fabric. It doesn't matter if you're using sort of quite a bold fabric, but when you're using something like this plain white, then you know, yeah, it's at your own risk if you choose to if you choose to use a pen on it, and if you don't mind it being seen, then that's okay. It's all fine. It really doesn't matter. So this is my cloth marker. I'm going to use a red so that I can clearly see which one it is. I'm going to do it in my seam lines. Now, I haven't mentioned the seam lines yet because it's not important necessarily until we start sewing. But now that I'm going to mark this where my bottom and my top is, I may be more inclined to think about where my seam allowance is. And the seam allowance is usually 1.5 centimetres. On this one, this is the adult version of this mask, and I believe it's a 1.5 centimetre seam allowance, which is basically just where you're going to stitch around the edge and how far away from the edge that is. So 1.5 centimetre seam. I'm just going to show you on the tape measure. So 1.5 centimetres is, well, it's obvious it's 1.5 centimetres, so it's about that wide. So 1.5 centimetres is about the same as 3/4 of an inch. So if you understand what that means, it's 3/4 of an inch or 1.5 centimetres. 1.5 is slightly smaller than the 3/4 inches. I prefer to use 1.5 centimetres. That's what I've used for the last 20 odd years. So that's how I usually refer to it. But there's a lot of people out there that just use 1 centimetre seam. And that's what we did when I was teaching at the college. A lot of the time it was like the standard thing. It was easier to understand how to add a single centimetre rather than a 1.5 centimetre. Don't ask me why. I suppose it is because it's just you know what a centimetre is, and it's more challenging to understand what a 1.5 centimetre is. But either way, it's quite simple, really. So I'm going to mark on mine a 1.5 centimetre seam allowance on the fabric. If you need to, please mark it on the paper. But usually things like this are just a given to me. I know that's got 1.5 centimetre seam allowance included, so I know that. But you might want to add it onto here, so you can quite simply put it like this. Doesn't matter where you do it. You can do it near the seam. 1.5 centimetre seam allowance included. You can write it out like the full sentence. But 1.5 centimetre, that's back to front, isn't it? Seam allowance, and that's what means seam allowance. And I put included. I don't need to put that. I just need to put seam allowance because I know that is what is on here. So as I say, for me, it's just like, that's just normal. But if you're a beginner, you may not know that that's what happens. So anyway, back to it. 1.5 centimetre seam allowance. I'm going to mark my 1.5 centimetre seam allowance along the bottom and the top. Not because I need it, but because it will help us to show when we sew. Oh, it's good that. Poet, aren't I? 1.5 centimetre seam allowance. So I'll show you this in a second. 1.5 centimetres all the way along. Tape measure is quite an easy way of doing it. You can do this with a ruler, or if you've got the right pattern kind of equipment, please use that as well. 1.5 all the way along the top and the bottom. It is going to be easier to follow when we're sewing it. But what I might do is that, because this is the necessary on this fabric, it's not so easy to tell which is the right or wrong side of the fabric. I think this is the right side of the fabric that I'm writing on. It doesn't matter either way, but right side up, facing up. And you want to, when you're sewing them, you want your right faces facing together. Right sides facing together, not your right face. You don't. Well, you maybe do have the right or wrong face, I don't know. So the top was shallower and less steep than the bottom edge. So you've got 1.5 centimetre edge marked along there and along the bottom. So that I remember, I can quite simply on the bottom write a big B. Madness, I know. And on the top, I'm going to write a big T. Big T and big B. Easy. If you need to, do that on both pieces. It will help us, as I say, when we're sewing it. So I'll just do the same. And I'm just going to have a bit of a play about by just using a different colour though now. So I use a red pencil on the other one. And you will understand why in a moment, because one will become the front and one will become the back. And then it's clear I've done it in two different colours and there can't be any mix-ups then. Just thought of that. All these years of experience, eh? So B for bottom, which is the most steepest edge, and B onto the side, and then undo my top. Mark 1.5 centimetres all the way along. Yeah, I don't know what that was all about. I don't know whether it was one of the other lectures that just was used to using 1 centimetre rather than 1.5. That's just what I've always known since, like, my grandma was showing me, or my mum was showing me, or GCSE textiles showed me, or A-level textiles, or degree. So, I mean, what do I know? So I'm going to put the T's at the top. T's at the top, you can't see that necessarily as well. Ah, yeah, can't you? T's and B's are on there. So we have the T's and B's in yellow, and we have the T's and B's in red. Now, I'm going to do something real obvious right now. I'm going to choose which one is my front and which one is my back. Okay, so front is going to be the red. You don't have to do this. These pencils will come out, but it does take effort, especially if you're using red on white. You aren't going to remove that as quickly as you'd like, even if it is a cloth marker. Okay, so be wary of that if you're going to do that. Or if you're going to stitch something onto it or print something onto it, then that'll be all right to do that. But you don't feel like you have to do that front. And then I'm going to label this one as the back. La-di-da. Just like that. So we now have our front and our back ready to go. We just need to do a couple more things so that we know what we're doing. So we will need the elastic. So as I said, I found some that was just actually it was in my garage. It was hanging around in the bag of planting stuff for the allotment. So I just found that in there. You can find if you've got an old sewing kit, you might have some left in there. You can get it online, easy peasy really. Just thinking that if you don't want to use elastic, you can always use just some of this fabric, and I'll show you how to do that in the next tutorial as well. So we've got it to the stage where we're ready to start stitching, and then we will be stitching the elastic or the fabric in. I'll show you those two different methods. So I'll do one side I'll do with the elastic, the other side I'll do with the fabric insert, so you can see both types. And yeah, what was I saying? And the only other thing you need to do is to know where you're going to put the pleats in, which is basically like a little gather or a pleat. We're going to put them in so that it fits the face. At the moment, it's going to be of no use to anybody because it's just too big. So it's going to go against your face, and then it's going to be pleated and gathered in 2 different areas. So for the next part of this, you're going to need some elastic or some other bits of fabric available. So you can use the same fabric that you've got already. You're going to need your sewing machine, or you can hand stitch it. So you'll need a needle and thread. You'll need some thread for your sewing machine, and some elastic, and and hopefully you'll have got all this bit done, so we'll be ready to go with the next part. So I look forward to seeing you all soon. See you soon. I will let you know when I'll do the next part once I've got sorted. Bye.